Welcome to Real Rockford Files, for tales of the paranormal, supernatural, and the flat-out unbelievable. Today I'll be sharing ghost stories from Nevada. Let's get into it. Story 1. I worked on the 3700 block of Las Vegas Boulevard for about 4.5 years. I didn't work for the casino itself, but a third-party vendor. We faced the fountains. Vegas always tears down and builds again. There really isn't anything old in the city, but that does not mean once it's gone forever. After about a month of working, I noticed that I'd always see the back of a woman's head. She was blonde, about 5'5". She wasn't really there. I'd always catch just a glimpse of her and then she'd be gone. Funny thing is, she was shopping in the women's section of the store. I'd tell any coworker who'd listen to me, but was always brushed off as the weird guy who talked about the paranormal. This location was the biggest in the shopping area, about 1,500 square feet of shopping space, plus an additional 1,100 square feet of stock rooms where merchandise was kept. The stock rooms were split into 4 different sections. Each section had its own door separating it from the others. In one of the sections that was the farthest from the sales floor, that we called the shoe room, everyone would get a creepy feeling and try to spend the least amount of time back there. I didn't mind it because it was a quiet area and one could hide out from management. Quarterly, I worked overnight shifts to reset the floor and make sure all new pieces were showcased. I worked these shifts frequently. It was nice seeing the city empty and lit by all the lights. Every shift went on and no reports of anything strange occurring. Then it happened, out of nowhere and totally unexpected. During this particular shift, it was only the visual manager and myself working for a few hours. It was around 2:30 a.m. I was in the shoe room, about 7 feet up on the ladder, grabbing some shelving, singing to myself. I heard my name being called. Johann, Johann. I called out, "What?" However, I had no response. I was thinking since I heard my name being called that the manager was in the stockroom nearby. I called out again, but heard nothing in return. I walked out to the floor and called out, "What?" one more time. I then saw the manager walk from the other side of the store, asking what I wanted. I was a little confused because she was the one asking. She heard her name being called out while I was in the shoe room at the same time. A heavy air fell over the sales floor once we both realized that none of us were calling out to each other. A few months later, we had to downsize the location. Knowing that the women's side and the shoe room were going to a new restaurant coming was a relief to me. Knowing that was most of the paranormal areas were not going to be included in the new location, I was grateful. Story 2. I was always sensitive when I was younger. I knew that we were surrounded by spirits and could sense when they were near. My high school was situated near an old one-room schoolhouse that had been closed for somewhat around 50 years. The stories I was able to gather from the older inhabitants of the town were that there were strange happenings in the school, and a small group of the younger students were found dead in the schoolroom one morning when the school marm opened the building for the day. Intrigued, I went to investigate. The doors and windows were boarded up after years of vandalism. I heard the giggling of young children from inside this condemned building, and then the patter of running feet. Shortly after this, I began to hear these sounds in the halls of my high school when I was alone. There were very few times I felt they were malevolent, but they did keep the malevolent spirits that walked the halls of our school at bay. Of course, I have many other stories. The town where I spent most of my youth was filled with these haunted places, but what happens in the desert stays in the desert. I lived in a house where we could hear old radio stations played at odd hours of the night and day, and a young woman with long hair walked the halls of our home. She looked vaguely like my mother, who had killed herself when I was 12. She had long brownish hair that she would stand near the heater and brush in the early mornings most days. She would move things around and be a general nuisance, but she never did anything overtly evil or mean to me. Story 3. I was a young girl, maybe 9, 10 years old. I had been going to this elementary school in Las Vegas where we had a small fundraising carnival going on. My father had taken us to make up for not seeing us for almost a month. My little sister and I were all over the place having fun and playing the games when I got this retching feeling in my gut. It felt like a vortex swallowing me up from the inside out, and all I wanted to do was lay down. I stood frozen, trying to gather my bearings. My father didn't notice. He was looking for my sister who had gone to participate in the cake dance game, but I was standing in the middle of a large crowd, frozen, yet aware of my surroundings, when my vision began to blur and darken. I tried to look around as if someone could help, but then I saw a figure in front of me of a woman. She looked as if she had been crying at first, but then she smiled at me and waved goodbye and then disappeared. The feeling that had me frozen left me instantly, and I could see my father running up to me with his phone pressed against his ear, saying, "We need to go now." We got into the car and drove to my grandmother's house, where my grandfather had been sitting on the porch crying, as my dad ran inside. Grandpa walked to the car and sat in the back seat. I asked him what happened as soon as he closed the door. He simply looked at me and said with a familiar face of tears rolling down his cheeks, "Now you're going to need to give your daddy some time." Me too. "What happened, Grandpa?" I asked, and it was then he just told me that my grandmother Mary had passed away. I didn't know what it had meant, but I didn't cry, even though she was my favorite person in the world. But I'd felt I had been given closure from the spirit I'd seen at the carnival, who, now that I think about it, looked a lot like my grandmother, only younger. Story 4. At the time that this story came into place, I was only a baby, so really this is from my mother's experience. Whenever I ask my mom if she's ever had any paranormal encounters, she always brings up this memory. Her first encounter was when my father was at work, and it was just her and me in their bed in the middle of the day. Later in the day, she heard the kitchen cabinets downstairs open and close in a slow pattern. She would listen closely and then say, "Hi, Grandma." She explains that she never felt scared or threatened because she knew it was her. She knew because her grandmother was closest to her, and still was after death. Sometimes she would randomly wake up around 2 or 3 a.m. after she felt a light rub on her chest, like her grandmother was waking her up. Unfortunately, as I got older and my mom and my younger brother, my mom stopped having any activity, which made me feel sad because I've been wanting to come upon a friendly spirit of my own out of dangerous curiosity. I tell my parents this all the time, and they tell me to never mess with spirits because I never know what I'm getting myself into. My mom, who somewhat believes in all things spiritual, tells me I could only and should only communicate when you need them to leave you alone or to guide them into their own realm where they're supposed to be, which I'm not sure if I believe in that. Story 5. Even to this day, I still find this experience to be the strangest thing I've ever experienced. I don't remember how old I was, but I was pretty young. I don't remember many things from this, but my mother described me as always being scared, looking around as if something was there, and feeling a dark presence around me. From what I remember, this all started when my mother was making me read the Bible. Being a little kid, I thought reading the Bible was boring. The one thing that was weird is that every time I would read, I would get extremely sleepy. After reading a few words, I would start to get tired. My mother said it was the devil keeping me from reading. I really didn't believe her, since I thought it was crazy for that to be happening. And the next thing I can remember was that strange things began happening. I don't recall sleepwalking or the things that I did while in that state, but the things my family said frightened me. I remember them sharing the things they had seen me do. Our apartment at that time was small. It had only 2 bedrooms. In one room, all 7 of my family members slept in that one room. The other one was for my cousin who was staying with us at the time. My mother told me to get up. I would get up out of bed, stand in the corner of the room and watch everyone sleep, sometimes stand right in front of them. My older brother said he would see me walk around, look out the window, open the door to the room as if to see someone on the other side. He said I would face the walls and talk with someone. I don't recall any of that, but what I do remember is the many dreams that I had during that time. I had dreams of my family's doppelgangers. There were only 2 dreams that I can fully remember. one about my younger brother and the one about my older sister. In the dreams, I would be with the particular family member that their doppelganger would appear and come after me, but the dreams would end right after they attacked. The one I had about my younger brother was the one that scared me the most. I never told anyone about these dreams, as I didn't want to frighten them anymore. The sleepwalking only got worse later on. I was starting to physically hurt myself and doing inappropriate things. My mother said I stopped talking and being more frightened, as if something was tormenting me, something we cannot see. I was literally going insane. My mother could not longer bear to see me in such a state, so my parents contacted the church and arranged for me to be blessed. I remember going to the church, standing in front of a large crowd. The priest said prayers and sprinkled holy water on me. After the ceremony, everything stopped. The sleepwalking, the dreams, my odd behavior, everything had returned to normal. My older sister described it as the light finally touching me. The dark cloud had been lifted. The entire experience was pretty frightening, and I still can't wrap my head around it, even with my family's testimonies. I guess I'll never know what was really happening. Story 6. It was the year 1968. My mom had a little girl. Her name was Linda. It was only me and my older sister, which was 6. I was 5. We lived in the projects, old government apartments. Baby Linda was 2. It was on a Saturday night around 10 p.m. Me and my sister share a bedroom. We had 2 twin beds. My bed was near the bedroom door. My sister's bed was across from mine. Anyway, we live in a 2-bedroom apartment. My stepdad worked graveyard shift. My mom was a housewife. As I was saying, we always kept the bathroom light on near the hallway. As I laid across the bed trying to fall asleep, I was looking out into the hallway. I noticed a little figure crawling. I stood half up and speak out, "Linda, come to bed, it's late." She crawled near my bedroom door and then stood up, walking slowly. I quickly got up and said, "Hurry up, you're going to get me in trouble, come to bed." She'd gotten halfway in. I was about to get up out of bed and drag her. Before I could start, she started walking backwards, got into the hallway, then right before my eyes disappeared. That's what I said, she disappeared, vanished right before my very eyes. I quickly jumped out of my bed, ran to my sister's bed, but there in the bed was my baby sister Linda. So tell me, what the hell did I see? And what did I talk to? It wasn't my baby Linda. I squeezed between them, both afraid, my heart beating so fast. Covers over my head, I could hear dragging footsteps around the bed. I was absolutely terrified. I think the little sister that I saw wasn't my little sister in the bed, but one that died before I was born. Story 7. When I was 14, I lived in the country about 20 miles outside of a small town. I loved it. One night I was in the bed, on the verge of sleep. I don't know what time it was, late enough for my family to all be asleep. Well, I was almost asleep when out of nowhere I hear this man's voice say, "1." It was loud and deep. It didn't stop at 1, it started counting. I was startled, completely awake, and I was looking around to find the source of the counting. The layout of my room, I should point out, my bed was next to the wall by the window, and at the foot of my bed was my walk-in closet. At the far wall of my closet was a dresser. When I looked down my body and into the closet, I saw a small black shape sitting on my dresser with red eyes. I could clearly see the shape and arms and legs, which they were swinging back and forth like a child would do sitting on a chair too big for them. When I saw the thing, I froze in absolute terror. I couldn't move, couldn't even scream. Believe me, I tried many times. The third time this thing reached the end of its counting, it put its hands on the edge of the dresser and pushed off and landed on the floor. I prayed the hardest I've ever prayed in my life and was able to finally move and ran like there was no tomorrow out of my room into my sister's room. I climbed into bed with her and cried my eyes out. To this day, I have no idea what that thing was or what it wanted, I've never been able to sleep with the closet door open since. It's been almost 20 years and I'm still scared by it. That was the first experience and the worst, but since that day, I've had many, many more. Some in that house which we built and then in every place I've ever lived. Has anyone else had an experience like this? Or any idea of what it could have been? I'd love to know. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Hope you enjoyed.